Hi, this is Larry London. Welcome once again to Border Crossings. And today we are joined by a singer, songwriter, and a very talented musician who's given us many, many hit songs over the years. All the way from Montreal, Canada, Gino Vannelli. Welcome to Border Crossings on the Voice of America.
Good to be with you.
Are you in Canada right now?
No, I'm in Oregon right now.
In Oregon. I thought maybe you were in Serbia or Portland or
We
who
just
knows,
we just got
Netherlands.
back. We just got back from Serbia. We've done a couple of videos and a filmed concert in Belgrade.
Oh, great. Well, how did it go? I mean, what's it like performing internationally, overseas?
I love it. Serbia is kind of a well-kept secret. I mean, the food's great. People are very warm. And we opened up a brand new theater there, and it's very interesting recording. It'll be out next year.
Wow, it's great when, I mean, the people don't speak English as their first language, but they know the words to your songs. That must feel
Well, they're
gratifying.
pretty good. I mean, English is a strong second language for them.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Gino Vannelli. I Just Want to Stop. That was one of your early number one songs. And I was playing that when it first came out, when it was brand new. And you've been doing this quite a while. I read where you started off as a drummer.
hmm I was playing in a relief band for in a club called the Casa Loma in Montreal. I started when I was 10, and I played a couple of years, and really was a great thing because I got to see a lot of very, very fine musicians like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and Duke Ellington, Stan Kenton, a lot of great artists. So and up front and close too. So it was a hell of a
Mm.
good training ground for me.
And you mentioned names like Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa. Those are typically associated with
hmm
jazz drummers. Do you
hmm
do you consider yourself to be a jazz musician, or I mean,
Well,
what is your favorite genre?
the vocabulary that jazz and classical has to offer is a very wide vocabulary. You could always distill it into contemporary music. But I mean, if you really, it's kind of like if you want to learn the English language, you have to read at least some of Shakespeare and some of Dickens and so on and so forth. And listening to jazz is kind of like that because you have musicians with such a breadth of knowledge. And so if you want to acquire the knowledge, you listen to the jazz musicians, and then you could really do what you want with it.
And as a 10-year-old, you played in
hmm
clubs? How did you
Yeah,
get through the doors of a club at 10?
because my uncle got me through.
Oh, that's it. Takes an uncle.
Yes, it
Uncle
does.
Vinny.
No, not exactly, but close.
We're talking with Gino Vannelli, who has a brand new album out. It's his 22nd album. Boy, oh boy, that's a lot of work. It sounds tiring. The Life I Got to My Most Beloved is the name of the album.
Yes.
But this is your first new album in what, 5 years? 6 years
Um,
almost?
no, the more of a good thing came out. I believe it was 2020 or 21, and Wilderness Road came out in 18. So it's really me about 4 years.
Hmm. Okay. So why did you wait so long?
Well, Trisha had gotten ill, and it really kind of mucked things up for a while, and with surgeries and all that. So I was on it. I was trying to finish it, but it slowed things down.
Hmm. Well, like I say, I'm very sorry for your
Oh,
loss.
it's okay. That's all right. I appreciate that.
And we're glad that you're coming out with new music. I guess music is therapeutic. It can be very cathartic, to write songs and about
It
certain
is.
special people and special memories that maybe the audience wouldn't know, but you would.
Well, they might. I mean, the lyrics are on the album. The album will be coming out in February, and the first single is out, and the second single called Stormy River will be out in January. It's a deeply personal record, as you could imagine, because it was written during Trisha's illness. And but it's different in the sense that I was able to gather and put away a lot of my sadness and fill the tracks with gratitude, and fill the lyrics with just stupendous memories.
So I mean, I'm just trying to get a handle on what genre Gino Vannelli is in these days. Because I know you studied Italian opera, you loved and still love classical music. You mentioned it,
Yep.
but yet you're known for your pop hits. That's kind of what made you a
Yes.
superstar back in the '70s and '80s.
Well, to a certain segment of the audience, I'm known as a pop artist, but to the people who come and see the live shows, who have been coming for the last 50 years, they really understand that it's really an amalgamation kind of music that's really a fusion of really jazz, classical, pop, of course, soul, and Latin maybe. But I've always enjoyed fusing many, many genres together, and I think that makes, for me, it's interesting because you can pull a lot of influences that way.
What are the songs that Gino Vannelli has to do at every concert? What is a must
Well, you
perform?
can't really get away with not doing Living Inside Myself. I just want to stop Brother to Brother. You know, People Gotta Move. Wild Horses are one of those. So maybe there's four or five that I really need to do, and maybe one or two that are questionable.
And they get the biggest response, I would guess, because
No,
everybody
not
knows the
necessarily.
hits.
I mean,
No?
people, of course, they do get a response, but it's a different kind. It's a very distilled audience. They really are very, very acquainted with every song on each album, and they followed me through the years. And when I kind of alter some of the arrangements a little bit, and when the song finally comes in, they recognize it and they give me a hoot. And so. Like I said, it's a pretty distilled audience, and for me, that's what makes it all the more fun, because it's not just set and play, and I gotta wind myself up and go on stage. Every performance is a bit of a challenge. Singing those songs is a bit of a challenge, and sometimes I wonder who wrote them. And it's a great band, of course, and I really enjoy doing the show. And the great thing about it is that I don't do too many of them. Maybe I'll do about 15 a year now, maybe
Really?
20 the most. Yeah, yeah, it's enough. And that way it really is fresh. All the band members are really, they look forward to it. And
Well, it's nice that you've come to a point in your career when you can be, I'm sure when you first started, you didn't get to choose only 15 shows a year. You were probably on the road
no,
all
no,
year
it was
long.
100 to 150 shows a year,
Yeah.
in the beginning. And that it was that way for a good 20, 25 years. And it's not only that you want to slow down, it's just that you really don't want to devalue your coin. So you just don't want to show up all the time.
Mhm.
And I enjoy playing all over the world. Like we just finished a European tour, Scandinavian tour, and of course we just came back from Serbia. And they wanted me to go to Azerbaijan and some other, far east, countries. And I'm thinking about it. And they've asked us to do a tour in Australia, and so we're thinking about that too. And Japan, of course, and all in due time. But it's really nice to have choices.
And for somebody who's traveled as much as you and toured as many places as you, do you have favorite places, favorite countries you like to visit?
Well, I've come to understand that really places are not very much without people. And so it's really the people that really inspire me. Yeah, the places can be pretty, but there's a lot of pretty places on this planet. But when people are warm and tender and they understand what you're doing, and we strike very, very interesting conversations, that is the fun of it.
And I assume the response is different in America to what it is in Europe and
A
traveling the
little
world.
bit, but there's a commonality, all over the world. And I find the people that are drawn to this show, to me, to the music, have something common running through them. And I think the most blatant thing is that their appreciation of art.
Right. I used to live in Japan. I lived in Tokyo for a couple of years, and
Hmm.
most artists I've talked to that have traveled internationally, performed outside of the US, love Japan. They love the people. The
Yep.
people are very intense listeners. They
Yeah, they are.
listen very closely to what you're
Yep.
saying, your lyrics.
Hmm.
It must,
And you imagine that you're dying a slow death on stage because there's that silent
right. That we're being
until.
polite.
Yes, well, actually, they're being polite, but then they erupt at the end and they let you know what they
Yes.
feel. So once you understand them, then you're okay with it.
Mm. Gino Vannelli is our guest, singer, songwriter. Which do you call yourself first? If you had to rate them or rank them, are you a singer or a songwriter first?
Well, I would kind of circle them around each other because it really kind of changes. I mean, I don't sing songs that I don't write, so very rarely, anyways. So it doesn't fall off the lips as well to say you're a songwriter singer. I guess singer songwriter seems to
Mhm.
be a little smoother in saying.
So if
But
somebody at a record label came to you and said, "Hey, Gino, you got to pick one or the other. You can't do both."
Oh, I've been told that in the early days, some people thought I was a really good singer and didn't think anything of my songs, and some people thought I was a good songwriter and didn't think anything of my voice. So I figured, maybe listen to half of them halfway. So I chose both.
Hmm. And so you also early on, you had an interesting encounter with Herb Alpert from
Yep,
A&M Records that
that's how I got
led
my first
to
record
you
deal.
getting signed. And
Yes.
I mean, it was kind of your, I guess, persistence, your uh,
Yeah,
determination.
most artists that you would speak to, there's something of a serendipity, some would even say spiritual, that happens when you're that self-employed and all you're dependent upon is your inspiration. Whatever comes up that morning, you wake up in the morning, of course, you're totally unemployed, and all you have is your dreams. And how do you manifest those dreams? So you have to really, in a sense, realize them or concretize them. And the process of concretizing what you're hearing in your head, it takes a little while. It takes a lot of persistence. And then it takes a lot of persistence to make others hear it the way you're hearing it.
Hmm.
And that is the journey. And Herb helped me, with that journey.
And you, I guess, ran past the security guard into the parking
I
lot
did.
and auditioned for him right there as he was getting into his car.
No, he was walking across the lot, and the guard pulled me away when I accosted Herb, and he sort of felt a little pity for me and summoned me over and told me to come back in 30 minutes. And so I went home. I mean, went to the hotel, practiced a little bit, and went back in 30 minutes. And he just told me he welcomed me to the family of A&M, and I recorded there for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, yeah, you had a lot of big albums, big hits there.
Yeah.
Gino Vannelli on our show today, the new album, The Life I Got, and he has a brand new song out, Keep On Walking, which just came out recently. So tell me about the new song.
Well, I was listening to Spotify last year, maybe a year and a half ago, and Keep On Walking, the 1975 version that was on the Storm at Sunup record, came on. And I usually am a pretty, deadly critique of my own material, but I listened to it and I said, that was pretty good, and at least good writing for a 22-year-old. And I said, I think I hear it this way now. And I just immediately went to the piano and started playing these Gil Evans kind of voicings. And I said, horns doing these lines would be really cool. And so I fooled around with it, went to the studio, and I started arranging it, putting it together. And my friend Peter Phil in Athens, Greece, did the back vocals, and Patrick Lamb did some live horns on it. So it really came out nice. I'm very pleased with it, and it's the first single from The Life I Got.
Keep On Walking is the new single from Gino Vannelli, who's with us right now. Do you remember where you were when you first heard your music on the radio for the first time?
St. Louis. I do remember. People Gotta Move just came out. It was 1974, and I was playing a gig in St. Louis, and things weren't going too well with the gigs. There were not that many people showing up. And suddenly, the record company told me that we're really getting a lot of action on People Gotta Move, especially on the R&B stations. And so then St. Louis was a very heavy R&B town, and so the promo man turned it on AM radio as we were going to the gig, and lo and behold, People Gotta Move came on, and it was the first time I heard myself.
When did you move from Canada to the US?
Well, I moved to New York when I was 18 for a year and a half, and then I went back home, an utter failure, and then I moved to Los Angeles. By the time I was 21, 22, after the first record, Crazy Life, I decided to move to Los Angeles, and I stayed there for about 14 years, then moved up to the Northwest after that.
And your dad was a jazz musician, so that's kind of what turned you on to music?
Well, he was a cabaret singer, and so the best thing he could offer me was the fact that he had impeccable taste, a very sophisticated taste especially for the time. And so he introduced me to big band, all the cabaret singers, the Ella Fitzgerald, the Frank Sinatras, and so on and so forth. And the greatest part of that education was not only to study how they sang, how the songs were written, and so on and so forth, was to study how they recorded them. Because in those days, they recorded straight to two-track. were no multiple tracks. And so I met with a drummer that played on a Sinatra session, and he told me play by play how it came about from 8 o'clock in the morning till when Mr. Sinatra would show up at 8 o'clock at night, and how they'd go through this pace, and that pace until it was ready. And when he walked in, it better be ready, because he was a kind of one take or two take guy. So everything is a fantastic education.
Yeah, the technology has certainly evolved from the start of your career to where it is today. Things
Yeah.
are a lot easier to do, although, there's negative sides of the technology as well with AI now and things of that nature. Artists not getting paid for their streaming, what they're worth, what they deserve.
That's
But
because it's they're streaming so much, and people have 10,000 songs on their phone. But still, Larry, there's something very, very cogent, very something pointed about it, and that is that it makes content all the more important. It makes who's singing and how they're singing and what they're singing about all the more important, because the coin's been so devalued. And so there's so much insipidity out there. There's so much mediocrity out there that when something comes along that has some content to it, most people recognize it immediately when it reflects your life. Because no matter what, I mean, look, all the technology in the world couldn't save my wife. I mean, she had the best care in the world. There are certain things of the planet, our planetary existence, being a human being, that there's no technology that could address. Yes,
right.
our delivery systems, life could be a little more pleasant this way or that way, but people are happy or not happy.
Yeah.
People are depressed or not depressed, or people find purpose in life or find no purpose in life. They have loved ones or they don't. They like living or they don't like living.
Hmm.
They can appreciate nature or not. And those are things that technology can't help you with.
What's the best advice you ever got, and who gave it to you?
Well, I think the best advice was just garnered over years of reading my favorite philosophers or poets or writers, and you sort of gather their knowledge and their wisdom, and you sort of put it in a crucible, and you boil it, and you sort of get your own stew.
Hmm. That's great. Well, I mean, like I said, I was playing your music a while ago, a minute ago, and you have evolved. You've managed to reinvent yourself several times. You're still the silver fox, though. I mean, all the women used to go crazy. I imagine they still do.
Well, it's best not to really think about those things. It's just, and I think I've profited by not really thinking about it too much. And it was a little bit that way, in my mid-20s. But once your hormones settle down and life, real life, accosts you, then you kind of understand what it's all about. I've been very blessed. I've been very, very lucky that every time I look down into my well, I don't see a bottom, and I throw my bucket down and something comes up.
Mhm. Is there
And to
anything
me,
left that you
that's
haven't done on the to-do list?
well, I'm about to. I've written 7 books, and they're about to come out. The first one's about to come out next year, and they're all
Wow.
graphic novels, and with music too, with a CD and their audiobooks and all that. So it's been a passion of mine for the last 20 years, and I finally finished the 7 stories that I wanted to, complete. And
Mhm.
uh, I've been an avid reader all my life, and I figured I want to have a hand at it. And lo and behold, a lot of personal experiences, deep thoughts, some very lighthearted thoughts too, came up, and lo and behold, we have 7 books, and they in the next 2 or 3 years they will all be out, because
Hmm.
it's a 7-part series.
Well, it's obvious you love writing. So the question would be, have you thought about screenwriting for a film, which you could score yourself as well?
The books that are going to be coming out at first were a couple of them at least were screenplays, and before you can actually get it done and get $20 million put behind it, you're going to have a million people tell you, well, I think the protagonist should be blonde instead of brunette, and I didn't want to go through that. I've had enough, just a taste of what Hollywood is like and what they do. I said, no, this is going to be put out my way. The books will be the books, and I think that's the way to do it. Like, for instance, The Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. She had a really successful series of books. And because the books were so successful, they paid good homage, to the books for the series. And I think it's important, sort of like the way Peter Jackson did for The Ring,
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings. I mean, Tolkien wrote that in the 40s, and he had enough respect for Tolkien's writing that he pretty much adhered to what Tolkien's concepts were.
Mhm. And you had mentioned a little while ago about your dad introducing you to the greats like Ella Fitzgerald and whatnot.
Mhm.
I can't imagine growing up in a house where, Louis Armstrong's at the dinner table with you, as you're probably
It's
too young
true.
to really appreciate that as a small child, and
No,
understand the
no, I did.
gravity of it.
Even at 6 or 7 years old, I could hear the phrasing. I mean, when I was 8 or 9 years old, I would rush home every Friday night. Oscar Peterson had a special on CBC, and that was the highlight of my Friday. 4 o'clock would be Oscar, and there's, when you're born into it, and at 3 years old, your father's playing Miles Davis and Coltrane and whatnot, and your ear acclimates to those notes and that sound, those harmonies, that by the time it's 5 years, 6 years later, and you have your hand at it playing drums, those notes don't sound very strange to you at all. You can hear the meaning and hear the sense in them.
What's the memory that stands out the most to you in your career? What would be your favorite moment?
Well, I mean, it has little to do with my career, but somewhat to do with it. I mean, when I met my wife, I mean, I had a canceled show in Portland, Oregon in 1974. And because the show was canceled, I did nothing but just walk around downtown and checked out Portland. And I saw her in a storefront window placing jewelry, and our eyes locked, and that was it. So
Wow.
that's one very, momentous moment.
Mhm.
Another one is meeting Pope John Paul. That was really a thrill. I
Wow.
played for him. He specifically invited me to his, I think, 20, was it a Christmas Jubilee in 2001, I think it was. And it's kind of a funny story because I got a call. Tricia and I were having breakfast. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and the downstairs business phone line rang, and we said, "Who the hell's calling at 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday?" And so I went downstairs begrudgingly and then picked up the phone. And this man with a heavy Italian accent said, Signora Vannelli, and so on and so forth. And I said, Vinny, if that's you, to hell, and I
Yeah.
didn't say it, you know.
Quit playing a
So
prank.
yeah, yeah, because my friend Vinny would
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Vito, he would play pranks on me, and
Mhm.
called again, and it turns out it was a bishop. He says, please don't swear at me again. So he told me that the Il Papa, he said, would like you to sing at his Jubilee, and he heard one of your songs, and da 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 da. And I was fortunate enough to have an audience with Pope John Paul, and he gave my wife an audience and my son Anton an audience. And I did some studying about his life, his playwriting, his poetry, and what he had accomplished during the war, what he had accomplished for Poland, to really free Poland of communism, and things of that nature. And I had tons of respect for him, that he
Mhm.
wasn't simply just a pope, he was really an accomplished human being.
Hmm. Now you mentioned you had a son. You have a son.
Yes, I do.
Is your son into music? Do you have other children?
I have one son, and as the doctor said, he was a lucky shot, and he's really a very, very smart man, and he's in the business of I wouldn't say physical therapy, but he really is doing some wonderful things with neuromuscular work, and so he's more or less in the medical field.
Hmm. So you've encouraged him, don't get in this business.
No, it was his choice. I always left it open to him, but
Hmm.
he saw what it was, and he wanted something for himself.
Hmm.
He didn't want to become his father's wannabe son.
Right. And be known as Gino Vannelli's son versus being
It's
known
usually
for.
tough on artists. I mean, there are a few that accomplish that. Maybe Michael Douglas, with his dad, and a few
Mhm.
do. But for the most part, it's really tough on kids that to try to follow in the footsteps of their dad, only because they're around their dad so much that they're inevitably going to copy some of the things that their dad or their mom did, and that's really not to their best benefit.
Mhm. Did you grow up in an Italian household? I know your family's ethnicity is Italian, but I mean, in
Trilingual.
New York Italians, they always have lots of food for everybody, and there's lots of people, lots of things going on in the house.
Being from Montreal, the ethnicity of my family was actually trilingual. So my father primarily spoke French. My mother primarily spoke English, but she spoke French and she spoke Italian. And my father spoke first language French, second language English, and then Italian. So the house would float around between English, French, and Italian all day long. And that's very typical of Montreal.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that it's great that, you can be multilingual like that.
Yeah,
I
if
mean, that
only you
really,
spoke each one of those languages right.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's important. Gino Vannelli is our guest, and as I mentioned before, "The Life I Got" is the name of the new album, and I assume it's available on iTunes and Amazon.
Not
And
yet.
not
February.
yet.
February. The single
Okay.
is available right now.
Okay. Well, we can get the single "Keep On Walking," which is a song that we heard played a little earlier. And so, given the fact that you have been exposed to so many tremendously talented artists, I like to ask this question of my guests and say, if you could pick three artists to collaborate with, deceased or alive, who would the three artists that Gino Vannelli would love to collaborate with?
Well, I wanted to collaborate with Oscar Peterson, and we nearly did, but he showed me his fingers, and it's just his last years, and he had such terrible arthritis he couldn't play anymore. So that was one of the things that I wanted to. Um, I would have liked to collaborate with Chick Corea. Um, he doesn't really play that much anymore, but Keith Jarrett too. So I like doing piano vocal stuff. So those are three piano players that I would really like to
Mhm.
collaborate with.
And
And I did
because,
get to collaborate with a great producer, engineer, Jeff Emmerich, who did all the Beatles stuff. And I think he did from Revolver on, Jeff Emmerich. And I got to do an album called Just the Geminis with Jeff in 1976. And
wow,
that was a great experience. We really got along very, very well.
that's fantastic. Gino Vannelli, it's been a thrill to have you on the show today. And I wanted to also ask, since we're broadcasting to 100 countries around the world and 350 million people, which includes the troops who tune in,
Good.
I'd like to give you the opportunity to spread the gospel, to give your message to the world, to the masses.
Well, there are a lot of messages, but I would say that after a few years after Trisha's passing, I would say cherish the moments as much as you can because they're very fleeting and they swiftly go by. And it's very easy for us to think we're invincible. And very easy to think those moments will last forever, but they don't. And so stop. And you can't live that way, but once in a while, stop and just look and take it in. And if you feel it, you'll feel this gratitude come in you, and then your life is better for it.
Do you have a memoir planned? I mean, you've written books. Have you written the
Well,
life of Gino Vannelli?
Stardust in the Sand was a book that come out. We're going to reprint it. It's out of print right now, but it was a bit of a memoir, meeting a lot of artists too, and how the awkward moments showed up with meeting, I think, 20 of my favorite artists and through the 70s and 80s and 90s.
Hmm. And where can people go if they want to see your concert? What website do you use that people can
Oh,
connect
it's
with you, social media?
GinoV.com and my Facebook. We always list the concerts. We'll have about 12 at the beginning of next year, and then we're going to do 5 concerts with the Quebec Philharmonic next November. I always love playing with orchestras, and
Hmm.
that's the whole classical side of me that comes out when
Right.
we do the orchestra dates.
Wow, I mean, it's an honor and a pleasure to meet you. Like I said, I know, of what I know of Gino Vannelli was the pop artist, but I'm getting exposed to a whole new side of Gino Vannelli and learning a lot about you, which is all very exciting news. And congratulations on the new album and the new
Thank you.
single.
Thank you.
And please do come back and visit with us again because it's always a pleasure to be able to have somebody of your stature on the show.
Nice talking to you, Larry.
Thank you. Gino Vannelli is our guest here on Border Crossings. Thanks for watching. This is VOA TV.